The morning sun painted the Vatican walls in soft golden light as Pope Francis slowly walked through his private chambers. He moved with careful steps, his right hand gripping a simple wooden cane that had become his constant companion in recent months. At 86 years old, his body showed the weight of time, but his eyes still sparkled with the same warmth that had touched millions around the world. Sister Maria watched from the doorway as the Pope paused by his desk, picking up a photograph. She knew the picture well. 40 men in ceremonial uniforms, the royal guard of Vatican City. These were the silent protectors who stood watch day and night, ensuring the safety of the Holy City. The Pope traced his finger across the faces in the photo, a gentle smile crossing his weathered features. "Your Holiness, your morning medications," Sister Maria said softly, entering the room with a small tray. The Pope turned to her, still holding the photograph. "Maria, please arrange a car for this afternoon. I wish to visit the Royal Guard quarters." The nun nearly dropped the tray. In her 15 years of service, she had never heard such a request. The Pope visiting the guards at their own headquarters was unprecedented. "But Your Holiness, we could arrange for them to come here. Your health." Francis raised his hand gently, the gesture kind but final. "Some messages must be delivered personally, dear Maria. Some words need the right walls to hear them." He placed the photograph back on his desk and took the glass of water from her tray. His hands trembled slightly, but his resolve remained firm. Word spread quickly through the Vatican corridors. By noon, Cardinal Bertone had arrived at the papal apartments, concern etched across his round face. "Holy Father, I must advise against this journey. Your doctors specifically said to avoid unnecessary travel. Perhaps we could arrange a video message instead." The Pope sat in his favorite chair, looking out at St. Peter's Square below. Thousands of tourists moved like tiny ants across the ancient stones. "Giuseppe," he said, using the cardinal's given name, "when I was a young priest in Buenos Aires, I learned that presence matters more than words. These men have given their lives to protect this place. The least I can give them is my presence." Cardinal Bertone shifted uncomfortably. He knew that tone. When Francis spoke with such quiet certainty, no amount of argument would change his mind. "At least let us arrange proper security, a full motorcade." "No ceremonies," Francis interrupted. "No cameras, no reporters. Just an old man visiting his guardians. Sometimes the most important moments happen in silence, away from the world's watching eyes." The preparation began immediately. Captain Marco Romano received the call at 2 o'clock sharp. His usually steady voice cracked when he answered. "The Pope wishes to visit us today." He had led the Royal Guard for 5 years, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. The guard quarters were modest, functional spaces never meant for papal visits. As news reached the other guards, a nervous energy filled their barracks. Men who faced potential threats without flinching now fumbled with their uniforms, checking every button, every medal. Young Lieutenant Paolo dropped his ceremonial sword twice while cleaning it. "Why now?" he whispered to his partner. "Why is he coming here?" Sergeant Andres, the oldest among them at 55, stood quietly in the corner. He had served 4 popes, but something felt different about this visit. Sometimes, he said to the younger men, great leaders know things we cannot see. They feel the turning of time before the clock strikes. The afternoon shadows grew longer as 3 unmarked cars prepared to leave the Vatican garage. Pope Francis emerged from a private elevator, walking slower than usual but refusing the wheelchair his staff had prepared. He wore his simple white cassock and zacchetto, no additional regalia. His personal secretary carried only a small bag and a sealed envelope. As the Pope settled into the back seat of the middle car, he looked once more at the photograph in his hands. 40 faces stared back at him, 40 souls he had prayed for every night. His driver caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "Where to exactly, Your Holiness?" Francis smiled softly. "To deliver a message that cannot wait for tomorrow. To plant seeds that must grow after the gardener is gone." The drive through Rome tested everyone's nerves. The Pope's driver, Antonio, had served for 12 years, but never transported such precious cargo to such an unusual destination. His knuckles turned white against the steering wheel as they navigated the narrow streets. Francis sat quietly in the back, his rosary beads moving through his fingers in a steady rhythm. Captain Marco Romano paced the entrance hall of the Royal Guard headquarters. The building stood just outside Vatican walls, a modest structure that housed the men sworn to protect the Pope. Today, that same Pope was coming to them. Marco checked his watch again. 10 minutes until arrival. He had spent 3 hours preparing the chapel, the only room he felt worthy of such a visit. "Captain, they're 2 minutes away," called Corporal Benedetti from the radio room. Marco's heart hammered as he walked outside. Behind him, 40 guards stood in perfect formation. They had gathered every man not on active duty. Some had rushed back from rare days off, unwilling to miss this historic moment. The 3 cars turned the corner slowly. No sirens, no police escort, just 3 ordinary vehicles carrying extraordinary purpose. When they stopped, Antonio rushed to open the Pope's door. Francis emerged with difficulty, waving away offers of assistance. He stood for a moment, taking in the simple building before him. The guards remained at attention as their Holy Father approached. Many had protected him for years, but had never spoken directly to him. Francis walked the line slowly, making eye contact with each man. At the entrance, Captain Romano knelt to kiss the papal ring, but Francis gently pulled him up. "No ceremony today, Marco. Today I come as a visitor, not as your Pope." His voice carried a weight that made several guards exchange worried glances. Something was different about their spiritual leader. His eyes held a knowledge that seemed to look beyond the present moment. Inside the building, Francis surprised everyone by refusing the prepared path to the chapel. Instead, he stopped at the common room where guards usually took their breaks. Coffee cups sat half empty on tables. Playing cards lay abandoned from an interrupted game. "This," Francis said softly, "this is where you truly live." He touched the worn furniture, studied the family photos taped to walls, read the duty roster covered in handwritten notes. Lieutenant Paolo watched in amazement as the Pope picked up a guard's forgotten sandwich, smiled, and placed it back carefully. These simple actions somehow felt profound. "Your Holiness," Captain Romano began, "we've prepared the chapel for your visit." Francis nodded but didn't move immediately. He stood by the window, watching the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the courtyard where guards train daily. "Tell me, Marco, how many years have you served?" 20 years, Your Holiness." "And in those 20 years, how many popes have you protected?" 3, Your Holiness. "John Paul II, Benedict, and yourself." Francis turned from the window, his expression thoughtful. 3 very different men, yet you serve each with equal devotion. That faithfulness, that constancy, it matters more than you know. He paused, seeming to gather strength. "Now let us go to your chapel. I have words that need sacred walls to witness them." The chapel was simple, with wooden pews worn smooth by years of use. A small altar held a crucifix and 2 candles. Francis walked to the front, then surprised everyone by turning back. "Please, sit among me, not behind me. Today we speak as brothers." The guards filled the pews uncertainly. They were used to standing at attention, not sitting with the Pope. Francis waited until everyone was settled, then sat heavily in the front pew. The effort seemed to drain him, and Sister Maria stepped forward with concern. "I am well," he assured her, though his pallor suggested otherwise. He looked around the room, taking in every face. 40 men, he said finally. 40 souls who have chosen to spend their lives standing guard. "But I wonder, have you ever asked yourselves what you truly protect?" The question hung in the air. Sergeant Andreas shifted uncomfortably. They protected the Pope, the Vatican, the Church's treasures. The answer seemed obvious, yet Francis's tone suggested deeper meaning. "You think you guard buildings and rituals," Francis continued. "You think you protect an old man in white robes. But I tell you now, you guard something far more precious. You guard hope itself. You stand watch over humanity's belief that goodness can triumph, that faith can move mountains, that love can conquer hatred. Several guards felt their eyes sting. These were not words they expected. Francis rose with effort and walked to the center aisle. I have lived a long life. I have seen evil and good, despair and joy. But my time grows short, and there are things that must be said while breath remains in these old lungs. The chapel fell completely silent as Pope Francis stood before them. The afternoon light streaming through the simple stained glass windows painted colored shadows across his white cassock. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn piece of paper, his hands shaking slightly as he unfolded it. Last month, he began, his voice barely above a whisper, I received the results of tests my doctors insisted upon. The news was not unexpected for a man my age, but it clarified something important. Time, my dear brothers, is the most precious gift we can give or receive. Captain Romano felt his chest tighten. The guards exchanged quick glances, understanding dawning on their faces. Their pope, their spiritual father, was telling them something profound. Sister Maria stepped forward again, but Francis waved her back with gentle insistence. Please, let me finish what I came to say. He looked at the paper in his hands, then crumpled it and put it back in his pocket. No, written words won't do. What I must share comes from here. He placed his hand over his heart. Young Private Matteo, barely 22 years old, sat in the back row trying not to cry. He had joined the Royal Guard just 6 months ago, inspired by Pope Francis's message of compassion. Now, watching this elderly man struggle to stand yet refuse to sit, Matteo understood true strength for the first time. Each of you took an oath, Francis continued, moving slowly down the center aisle. You swore to protect the Pope with your lives if necessary. Noble words, brave intentions, but I need something different from you now. I need you to protect what comes after me. The Pope paused beside Surgeon Andreas, placing a trembling hand on his shoulder. Andreas, you have served 4 popes. Tell me, what changed when each one passed? The surgeon cleared his throat, uncomfortable being singled out. The ceremonies changed, Holy Father, different styles, different focuses, but the faith remained. Exactly. Francis's eyes lit up. The faith remained, not because of the man in white, but because of people like you who carried it forward. You are not just guards of flesh and bone. You are guardians of an eternal flame. He continued walking, stopping beside different guards. At Corporal Benedetti's pew, he asked, Giovanni, you have 3 children, yes? Yes, Your Holiness. 2 boys and a girl. What do you tell them about your work? Benedetti straightened. I tell them I protect something sacred, something bigger than myself. Francis smiled sadly. And soon, very soon, you will need to show them what that means. When I am gone, he paused as several guards made sounds of protest. No, we must speak truthfully. When I am gone, many will mourn the passing of Francis, but you must help them see that they mourn the wrong thing. The message matters, not the messenger. Lieutenant Pavlo stood suddenly, emotion overwhelming protocol. Holy Father, please don't speak of such things. The Church needs you. We need you. Francis walked to the young man, taking his hands. Pavlo, sweet Paolo. The Church needed Peter, yet he died. It needed Paul, yet he too passed. What survived was not the men, but the love they planted in human hearts. That is what I ask of you now. Be gardeners of that love. The Pope made his way back to the front, each step more labored than the last. I have perhaps weeks, maybe a month or 2 if God wills it. My doctors dance around the truth, but I see it in their eyes. My body fails, but my spirit soars because I know what comes next depends on men like you. He turned to face them all again. In my desk, I have written 40 letters, 1 for each of you. They contain names and addresses, families who need help, children who need guidance, elderly who need companionship. When I pass, Cardinal Bertone will deliver these letters to Captain Romano." The guards sat stunned. Their pope was giving them personal missions, individual purposes beyond their daily duties. Marco Romano found his voice. "Your Holiness, we will honor whatever you ask, but why these specific families?" Francis's eyes twinkled despite his obvious exhaustion. "Because, my dear Marco, I have watched you all. I know your hearts. Young Matteo there, he has the patience for teaching children. Andres has the wisdom for counseling troubled teenagers. Each letter matches a guard to a family that needs exactly what that guard can offer. This is my final gift to you, and through you to them. You have protected my body. Now I ask you to protect souls that need your strength. Will you accept this mission?" Every guard rose to their feet as one. 40 voices said yes in unison, the word echoing off the chapel walls. Francis closed his eyes, swaying slightly, and Sister Maria rushed forward. This time, he didn't waver away. "I must rest a moment," he admitted, sinking into the nearest pew. His breathing was labored, his face pale as marble, but his eyes remained bright as he looked at his guards one more time. "Remember this day. Remember that true power lies not in weapons, but in compassion. Remember that I ask you to guard not just walls, but the hopes that shelter within them." Dr. Giuseppe Martinelli rushed through the Vatican corridors, his medical bag bouncing against his hip. The urgent call had come just minutes ago. Pope Francis had collapsed at the Royal Guard headquarters. As the Pope's personal physician for 8 years, Giuseppe knew every detail of his patient's deteriorating condition, but Francis had sworn him to secrecy. In the guard's chapel, chaos had erupted. Francis lay on a wooden pew, his breathing shallow, while Sister Maria held his hand and whispered prayers. Captain Romano barked orders, clearing space while maintaining security. The younger guard stood frozen, unsure whether to pray or act. "Where is he?" Giuseppe burst through the chapel doors, immediately kneeling beside his patient. Francis's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on his doctor's face. "Ah, Giuseppe," the Pope whispered. "I suppose you're angry with me for this little adventure." The doctor checked vital signs while shaking his head. "You promised me rest, Your Holiness. Complete rest. This visit could have waited." Francis managed a weak smile. "No, my friend. This could not wait. Time chooses its own moments, not ours." He struggled to sit up, ignoring the doctor's protests. "Help me to my feet. I have not finished what I came to do." "Absolutely not," Giuseppe said firmly. "We're returning to the Vatican immediately. You need oxygen, medications, proper care." But Francis had already begun rising, using Captain Romano's offered arm. The guards watched in awe as their pope, clearly suffering, refused to yield. He stood swaying, but his voice gained strength. "5 more minutes, Giuseppe. Give an old man 5 more minutes to complete his purpose." The doctor started to object, but something in Francis's eyes stopped him. This wasn't just papal authority speaking. It was a soul preparing for its final acts. Giuseppe stepped back, keeping watchful eyes on his patient's every breath. Francis reached into his cassock and pulled out the sealed envelope he had brought. "Marco," he called to the captain. "This contains instructions for when the time comes. Guard it well, but do not open it until that day arrives." Captain Romano accepted the envelope with shaking hands. The weight of it seemed enormous despite its small size. "Your Holiness, I cannot accept that such a day will come soon. We all must accept what is true, not what we wish," Francis replied gently. He looked around the room once more, memorizing faces. "Now, I have one final request. Form a circle around me, all of you." The guards moved uncertainly, creating a tight circle with Francis at its center. He raised his hands in blessing, but then surprised them by kneeling. The difficulty of the action was obvious. Dr. Martinelli stepped forward anxiously, but Sister Maria caught his arm. "My brothers," Francis spoke from his knees, "I kneel before you not as your pope, but as a servant recognizing true servants. You have given your lives to protection. Now I give you my blessing and my burden. When darkness comes, and it will come, be the light. When fear spreads, and it will spread, be the courage. When I am gone, please, Holy Father, young Matteo interrupted, tears streaming down his face. Don't say such things. Francis looked up at him with infinite tenderness. Death is not the enemy, young one. Forgetting how to love, that is the true enemy. Promise me you won't forget. One by one, the guards knelt too, until 40 men surrounded their pope in a circle of shared humanity. The chapel seemed to hold its breath. Even the dust motes floating in the afternoon light appeared to pause their dance. I have a confession, Francis said softly. In my dreams these past weeks, I have seen this moment. 40 guardians kneeling not in submission, but in unity. It gives me peace to know that when my earthly watch ends, yours continues. Sergeant Andreas spoke for them all. We promise, Holy Father, whatever you ask, wherever you send us, we will go. Your mission becomes our mission. Francis nodded, satisfied. Then help me stand. It seems my knees have forgotten their younger days. Several hands reached for him, lifting him carefully. Once standing, he touched each man's shoulder as he passed, whispering something personal to each. To Paolo, your doubts make you stronger, not weaker. To Benedetti, your children will understand dignity through your example. To Andreas, your wisdom will guide the younger ones when they stumble. When he reached the last guard, his strength finally failed. Dr. Martinelli caught him as he collapsed, this time unable to rise. Enough, the doctor said firmly. We leave now. As they carried Pope Francis to the waiting car, he managed one last look at his guards. They stood at attention, tears flowing freely down weathered faces. Remember, he whispered, though only those closest could hear. Love is the only guard that never fails. The motorcade departed urgently for the Vatican, leaving 40 men standing in the courtyard. Captain Romano held the sealed envelope against his chest. None of them knew that in exactly 20 days, they would open it to find the most extraordinary final request ever left by a pope. That night, as Francis lay in the papal apartment surrounded by medical equipment, he smiled in his sleep. The seeds were planted. His guardians understood their true purpose. Whatever came next, love would stand watch. 3 weeks passed like pages turning in a book no one wanted to finish. The Vatican press office released carefully worded statements about the Pope's health, but those who lived within the sacred walls knew the truth. Francis had not left his bed since returning from the guard headquarters. His public appearances were canceled, his audiences postponed indefinitely. Cardinal Bertone stood by the window of the papal apartment, watching the rain fall on St. Peter's Square. Below, thousands of faithful held vigil, their candles flickering like stars against the gray afternoon. They know, he said softly to Sister Maria. Somehow, they always know. In his bed, Francis stirred. His breathing had grown more labored over the past days, each breath a conscious effort. Dr. Martinelli had stopped pretending optimism was medicine. The Pope's eyes opened, focusing with difficulty on his visitors. Giuseppe, he whispered to the cardinal. The letters, are they ready? Yes, Holy Father. 40 letters, as you instructed, each sealed and labeled with a guard's name. Francis nodded weakly. And the funds, the arrangements for the families. Everything is prepared according to your wishes. The accounting has been most discreet. No one outside this room knows the full plan. A ghost of a smile crossed the Pope's face. Good. Surprises can be holy things when born from love. He closed his eyes again, gathering strength. Bring me Captain Romano, not the others, just Marco. There are words meant only for him. Sister Maria started to protest. Visitors exhausted the Holy Father, but Cardinal Bertone was already reaching for his phone. Within an hour, Captain Romano arrived, his dress uniform impeccable despite the haste. He had aged years in 3 weeks, the weight of the sealed envelope never leaving his mind. "Marco," Francis said as the captain knelt beside the bed. "Come closer. My voice has become a whisper, but my words carry the same weight." The captain leaned in, smelling the medicinal sharpness that surrounded his pope. Francis's hand, cold and light as paper, found his. "The envelope, you still have it. Always with me, Your Holiness. As you commanded. Good man. Inside, you will find more than instructions. You will find purpose. Each guard has been matched to a family that needs exactly what he can offer. But you, Marco, have a different task." Francis paused, his breathing labored. Dr. Martinelli moved to intervene, but the Pope's eyes flashed with surprising strength. "You must hold them together when their hearts break. They will want to abandon the mission in their grief. Don't let them. Remind them that serving the living honors the dead better than any monument." "I understand, Holy Father." Do you truly?" Francis squeezed his hand with surprising force. "They will say I gave them charity work. They will miss the point entirely. I haven't given them families to help. I've given them opportunities to discover who they really are beneath the uniforms." Captain Romano felt tears threatening. This man, this Holy Father, was thinking of others even as his own light dimmed. "We will not fail you." Francis released his hand. "You cannot fail me, Marco. You can only fail yourselves. Now go. Send my love to them all. Tell them their Pope was proud to be guarded by such men." As the captain left, Cardinal Bertone returned to the bedside. "Your Holiness, is there anything else? Any other messages?" Francis was quiet so long they thought he had fallen asleep. Then, barely audible, "Tell the world I died happy. Tell them I saw the future of the Church not in buildings or traditions, but in the hearts of those who serve. Tell them love won." That night, the rain stopped. The moon emerged from behind clouds, casting silver light through the papal windows. Francis lay still, his breathing increasingly shallow. Sister Maria held his hand, reciting prayers in a steady whisper. Dr. Martinelli monitored machines that told a story everyone already knew was ending. At 3:17 a.m., surrounded by those who loved him most, Pope Francis took his final breath. It was gentle, like a sigh of contentment. Sister Maria would later swear she saw him smile just before the end. Cardinal Bertone began the ancient rituals, but his heart wasn't in the ceremony. He was thinking of 40 letters and 40 guards who would soon discover their true calling. The bells of St. Peter's began to toll at dawn, their bronze voices carrying across the sleeping city. In homes and churches, hospitals and prisons, people woke to the sound they had dreaded. The Pope was dead. The shepherd had left his flock. At the Royal Guard headquarters, the phone rang. Captain Romano answered, already knowing the message. He listened to Cardinal Bertone's formal announcement, then hung up slowly. The sealed envelope seemed to burn in his breast pocket. With shaking fingers, he broke the wax seal and read the Pope's final instructions. His gasp echoed through the empty office. What Francis had planned, what he had asked of them, was beyond anything Romano had imagined. This wasn't just charity. This was transformation. This was revolution disguised as kindness. This was the gospel made flesh in the most unexpected way. Romano gathered himself and walked to the common room where his men waited. They stood as he entered, reading the truth in his face. Several made the sign of the cross. Young Matteo openly wept. "He's gone," Romano said simply. "Our Holy Father has returned to the Eternal Father, but he has left us with a mission. Gather everyone. What I must share will change us all forever." The funeral of Pope Francis drew millions to Rome. Kings and presidents, the powerful and the powerless, all came to pay respects to the man who had touched hearts across every divide. For 3 days, the world mourned together, united in loss. But in a small office at the Royal Guard headquarters, something extraordinary was beginning. Captain Romano spread 40 envelopes across the conference table. Each bore a guard's name in Francis's shaky handwriting. The men sat in complete silence, the weight of their Pope's final request heavy in the air. Cardinal Bertone had delivered them that morning, along with a substantial bank draft that had stunned even the experienced captain. "Gentlemen," Romano began, his voice steady despite his emotions. "His Holiness left specific instructions. Each envelope contains information about a family in need. Not just any families. These were personally selected by Pope Francis for each of you." Sergeant Andreas reached for his envelope first, his weathered hands trembling slightly. Inside, he found a photograph of a teenage boy and his elderly grandmother, along with an address in Trastevere. The note read, "Andreas, this boy needs a grandfather's wisdom. His father died in Afghanistan. His grandmother struggles with his anger. Your patience can save him." Around the table, guards opened their assignments. Matteo found a family of Syrian refugees with 3 young children who needed Italian lessons. Paolo discovered a widow with disabled twins requiring daily assistance. Benedetti's envelope contained information about homeless veterans living near Termini Station. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Costa said, staring at his assignment. "How could he know about my brother's death in the earthquake? This family, they lost someone the same way. How could he possibly know?" Romano held up Francis's master letter. "He writes here that he spent months preparing this. He had investigators research each of us, our backgrounds, our losses, our gifts. Then he matched us to families who needed exactly what we could understand and provide. But the money," Corporal Ferretti interjected. "Where did it come from?" Cardinal Bertone, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. "The Holy Father lived simply his entire papacy. He redirected funds normally used for papal ceremonies, elaborate vestments, renovations. Every saved euro went into a private account for this purpose. The lawyers estimate it's enough to support all 40 families for at least 5 years." The room erupted in whispers. Guards compared assignments, finding unexpected connections. The young recruit from Sicily was matched with a Sicilian family stranded in Rome. The guard who had lost his mother to cancer was assigned to help children whose mother was undergoing treatment. "This is why he came to us that day," Andreas said suddenly, understanding dawning on his face. "He wasn't saying goodbye. He was commissioning us for our true mission." Romano nodded. He wrote something else. He cleared his throat and read, "My beloved guards, you have protected my body faithfully. Now I ask you to protect souls. You stood watch at doors. Now I ask you to open them. You carried weapons. Now carry hope. Do not do this work in shadows. Let the world see that those who guard can also heal." Private Rossi, barely 20 years old, wiped his eyes. "But what about our duties here? How can we do both?" "The Vatican has approved a new schedule," Cardinal Bertone explained. "You'll maintain your guard duties but with adjusted shifts. 3 days on duty, 2 days with your assigned families. Additional guards are being recruited to fill gaps." This was Pope Francis's final negotiation with the College of Cardinals. Over the following days, the guards began their new missions. Andreas took 3 buses to reach the apartment in Trastevere. He found Marco, the angry teenager, throwing stones at abandoned buildings. Instead of scolding, Andreas sat nearby and began throwing stones too. They didn't speak for an hour. Finally, Marco asked, "Why are you here?" "Because someone thought we might understand each other," Andreas replied. "I was angry once too, when my son died." The boy stopped throwing. "Your son died. In a car accident. He was 17. For years, I threw stones at God." That afternoon, Andreas taught Marco to throw with better aim. Within a month, he was teaching him to box at a local gym, channeling anger into discipline. The grandmother wept when Marco started helping with groceries without being asked. Across Rome, similar transformations unfolded. Matteo's refugee family began learning Italian through stories about his own grandparents' immigration struggles. Paolo's disabled twins laughed for the first time in months when he showed up with a football, modified rules, and endless patience. But perhaps the most remarkable change happened with Benedetti and his homeless veterans. The corporal had served in Iraq before joining the Guards. He understood the nightmares, the difficulty adjusting to civilian life. He didn't just bring food and blankets. He brought respect, addressing each man by rank, listening to their stories. Within 3 months, he had convinced local businesses to hire several veterans. One restaurant owner, moved by Benedetti's dedication, offered his back room as a meeting place. The weekly gatherings grew from 5 men to 50, all finding community in shared experience. The media eventually caught wind of the story. Pope's secret legacy ran headlines worldwide. Reporters followed Guards to their family visits, capturing images of Switzerland's elite warriors reading to children, teaching elderly women to use smartphones, coaching unemployed fathers for job interviews. Not every assignment succeeded immediately. Some families rejected help, suspicious of uniformed men offering assistance. Some Guards struggled with language barriers or cultural differences, but they persisted, remembering Francis's words about patient love. Lieutenant Costa's assignment proved most challenging. The earthquake survivor family refused to see him for 2 months. He left groceries at their door, fixed their broken fence at night, cleared snow from their walkway before dawn. Finally, the 8-year-old daughter opened the door. "Mama says you can come in now," she whispered. "She says anyone who fixes things in the dark must have a good heart." 1 year after Pope Francis's death, Rome witnessed something unprecedented. St. Peter's Square filled not with dignitaries or tourists, but with ordinary families, 40 families specifically. They came with homemade banners, children in tow, elderly grandparents in wheelchairs. Each family wore simple white shirts with a single word: Francesco. The Vatican had not organized this gathering. It emerged spontaneously when the families discovered each other through their guardian guards. What started as chance meetings at markets became organized dinners, shared celebrations, and finally this pilgrimage to honor the man who had changed their lives without ever meeting them. Cardinal Bertone watched from the papal apartments, now occupied by the new pope. Tears flowed down his cheeks as he recognized faces from the files Francis had so carefully compiled. There was young Marco from Trastevere, now helping his grandmother with gentle patience. The Syrian refugee children held a banner reading "Thank you, Papa Francesco," in carefully practiced Italian. Captain Romano stood with his men at the edge of the square, overwhelmed by the sight. His own assigned family, a widowed teacher with 5 children, stood near the fountain. The eldest boy, Giuseppe, had just been accepted to university, something unthinkable a year ago, without the Pope's provision and Romano's tutoring. "Look what you've done, old friend," Romano whispered to the sky. "You turned warriors into fathers." The crowd began to sing spontaneously, not hymns or formal prayers, but simple songs their children knew. The Swiss Guards, known for their stoic discipline, found themselves wiping away tears as their adopted families waved and called to them. Sergeant Andreas stood with Marco and his grandmother. The boy, once so angry, now helped other troubled youth at the gym. He had Francisco's picture in his pocket always. "He never met me," Marco often said, "but he knew me better than I knew myself." The homeless veterans Benedetti worked with had formed a cooperative, starting a small moving company. They employed other veterans, giving them purpose alongside paychecks. One former soldier, Antonio, had been living in cardboard boxes 2 years ago. Now he ran the dispatch office, his daughter visiting every afternoon after school. As the sun set over St. Peter's Dome, the families began sharing testimonies. A microphone appeared, passed hand to hand. Stories poured forth, of guards who became tutors, mentors, surrogate sons and fathers, of children who learned discipline from military precision and love from unexpected sources. Paolo's twins, once confined to wheelchairs, now competed in adapted sports leagues. The Guard had spent countless hours modifying equipment, organizing transportation, cheering from sidelines. Their mother spoke through tears. "He gave my boys back their dreams." Lieutenant Costa's earthquake family had become advocates for disaster survivors. With Costa's help, they started a support group that now served hundreds. The daughter who first opened the door to him now wanted to become a social worker. "He showed us that helping others heals your own heart," she said. The new pope, watching from his window, summoned Cardinal Bertone. "What Francis did, this is beyond charity, isn't it?" "Yes, Your Holiness." He understood something we missed. The guards protected him, so he ensured they would protect what mattered most: the forgotten, the broken, the lost. He transformed duty into love. As darkness fell, candles appeared throughout the square. 40 families and 40 guards stood together, boundaries dissolved. The rigid formations that usually define the Swiss Guard melted into embraces, shared laughter, children riding on uniformed shoulders. Near the obelisk, young Matteo sat surrounded by his Syrian family. The eldest daughter, Amira, had just won a scholarship to study medicine. She had written in her application essay about the guard who taught her Italian through medical terminology, preparing her for a dream she hadn't dared voice. "Will you still visit when I'm at university?" she asked Matteo. "Try to stop me," he replied in Arabic, making her parents laugh. The families had prepared a surprise. As the bells of St. Peter's chimed 9 o'clock, they unveiled a marble plaque they had commissioned together. It read, "To Pope Francis, who saw guards as gardeners and planted seeds of love that will bloom forever. From your 40 families." Cardinal Bertone accepted the plaque on behalf of the Vatican, promising it would be installed in the Guards' chapel where Francis had delivered his final message. As he spoke, a murmur ran through the crowd. People pointed skyward where a flock of white doves circled the dome, their wings catching the last light. "Papa Francesco is watching," a child's voice piped up, causing smiles throughout the square. The gathering continued past midnight. Families exchanged addresses, planned visits, created bonds that transcended their original connections. The Syrians invited the earthquake survivors for dinner. The veterans offered to help move furniture for the elderly. The guards watched in wonder as their separate missions wove into a single tapestry. Captain Romano found himself standing with all his men near the fountain. They had removed their ceremonial helmets, holding them at their sides. In the reflection of the water, he saw not the elite warriors they had been, but the servants they had become. "He knew," Romano said quietly. "Somehow he knew exactly what each of us needed to discover about ourselves." Andreas nodded. "We thought we were protecting him. He was preparing us for our true calling." As the square finally emptied in the early morning hours, the guards walked their families to buses and trains. Promises were made for next meetings, for continued support, for a future Francis had imagined, and they were now living. The Vatican's official records would note this as an unauthorized gathering. But in heaven, perhaps, Francis smiled at what unauthorized love could accomplish. His 40 seeds had grown into a garden that would outlive them all. 5 years had passed since Pope Francis's death. The marble plaque installed in the Guards' chapel had been worn smooth by countless fingers tracing its words. What started as 40 individual missions had evolved into something no one could have predicted, a global movement that the media dubbed the Francis Effect. Dr. Martinelli, the Pope's former physician, sat in his office reviewing applications. After Francis's death, he had established a foundation using his memoir royalties to expand the Guard family program beyond Rome. His desk overflowed with letters from military units, police departments, and security services worldwide, all wanting to replicate what the Swiss Guards had done. "Another 100 applications this week," his assistant announced, bringing fresh coffee. "The Japanese Self-Defense Forces want to start a program. Also, the London Metropolitan Police and the Canadian Mounties." Martinelli smiled, remembering Francis's words during their final conversation. "Giuseppe, healing isn't just medicine. Sometimes it's simply seeing others truly, then acting on what you see." In Rome, the original 40 families had become the foundation of something larger. The Syrian refugees Matteo helped now ran an integration center for other immigrant families. They employed 15 people and had helped over 300 families find homes, jobs, and community. Amira, now in her third year of medical school, volunteered at their free clinic every weekend. Captain Romano, recently retired, directed the Guard Family Institute. Military units from 6 continents sent representatives to learn not just the program's structure but its spirit. He always began orientation the same way. This isn't about charity. It's about discovering that those who protect can also heal. The earthquake survivor family Lieutenant Costa supported had become nationally recognized advocates. Their support network now operated in 12 Italian cities. The daughter who once wouldn't open the door had just graduated with a degree in disaster relief management. At her ceremony, she introduced Costa as the uncle who taught me that broken things can be rebuilt stronger. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation belonged to Marco from Trastevere. The angry teen Andreas had found throwing stones now trained troubled youth in boxing, while studying for his police academy entrance exams. His gym's wall displayed 2 photos side by side, Pope Francis and Sergeant Andreas, with the inscription, "Men who saw potential where others saw problems." On this 5th anniversary, the Vatican announced something unprecedented. The new Pope, deeply moved by the continuing impact of Francis' final mission, declared an annual Day of Guardianship, not a holy day or feast day, but a day recognizing all who protect and serve by lifting others up. The announcement ceremony filled St. Peter's Square once again. This time, the crowd numbered in thousands, not just the original 40 families, but all those touched by the expanding ripples of Francis's vision. Guards, soldiers, police officers, and security personnel from around the world stood beside the families they had adopted. Young Private Thompson from Chicago stood with Maria and her 3 children. He had started his family connection after reading about the Swiss Guards online. Maria had been struggling after her husband's deportation. Thompson helped with school pickups, homework, weekend outings. Her eldest had just received early acceptance to Northwestern University. Officer Yukiko from Tokyo accompanied the Tanaka family. After Japan's earthquake, she had found them living in temporary housing, the grandfather refusing help out of pride. She learned origami to sit with him, folding paper cranes in silence until he finally spoke. Now he taught origami at senior centers, sharing his story. That evening, the anniversary celebrations began globally. In Tokyo, Officer Yukiko led thousands of security personnel and families in a candlelight procession. In Chicago, Private Thompson, now Sergeant Thompson, organized a festival where Francis' family shared cultural foods and traditions. Sao Paulo's celebration filled a football stadium. But the heart of the celebration remained Rome. St. Peter's Square overflowed with the original 40 families, their extended networks, and thousands who'd joined the movement. The Vatican had prepared for 100,000 attendees. Nearly 300,000 arrived. The ceremony began simply. 40 guards, some original, some sons of those who'd passed, stood with 40 families. Each guard held a candle. Each family held a flower. As the sun set, they exchanged these symbols. Light given for beauty received. Andreas, moving slowly but determinedly, approached the microphone. The square fell silent for the eldest original guard. Pope Francis saw what we couldn't, he began, his voice still strong. He saw that inside every protector beats the heart of a parent. Inside every guard lives a gardener. He didn't change what we do. He revealed who we are. Behind him, a children's choir began singing. Not a hymn, but a simple song Amira had written. Where guards become gardeners, hope blooms eternal. Where warriors become fathers, love builds its home. As voices joined from throughout the square, something extraordinary happened. The Vatican's lights dimmed, and 300,000 candles were lit. From above, the square became a sea of light, each flame representing a life touched by Francis's final mission. The new pope appeared on the balcony, not in elaborate vestments, but in simple white. My predecessor asked 40 men to guard hope, he declared. Tonight, we see hope guarding the world. Let us pray not for more guards, but for more gardeners. not for more security, but for more sanctity and service. As midnight approached, the celebration's final moment arrived. The Francis families had prepared one last surprise. Working in secret for months, they had created a digital memorial, a website where anyone touched by the movement could share their story. As it launched, messages poured in from around the globe. A child in Mumbai wrote, "My guard uncle taught me to read. Now I teach others." A widow in Detroit shared, "They secured my house, then secured my heart." A former gang member testified, "I was guarding my reputation. They taught me to guard my community's future." By dawn, over 1 million stories had been submitted. The website crashed repeatedly from traffic, but technicians, many from Francis families, worked through the night to maintain it. As Rome woke to a new day, the movement's next phase was already beginning. Universities offered degrees in Francis studies. Corporations implemented guard family programs for security staff. Even prisons started pilot projects, with remarkable results in rehabilitation rates. Captain Romano stood once more in the chapel where it all began. The worn pews, the simple altar, the afternoon light through stained glass. Everything remained as it was that day 10 years ago. Only the marble plaque had been added, its message now known worldwide. "You did more than you knew, Holy Father," Romano whispered. "You didn't just give us families to guard. You gave the world a new way to understand protection itself." Outside, the Eternal City bustled with life. Guards reported for duty at the Vatican, but their definition of protection had forever changed. They guarded buildings, yes, but more importantly, they guarded the hope that one man's vision could transform the world. In heaven, perhaps Francis watched with joy as his 40 seeds had become a forest covering the earth. He had asked them to be faithful. They had become revolutionary. He had asked them to serve. They had taught the world to love. The last entry in Dr. Martinelli's book read simply, "Pope Francis performed his greatest miracle after death. He turned guards into saints, duties into devotions, assignments into adoptions. He proved that love, properly planted, never stops growing." As the sun set on the 10th anniversary, the movement faced forward. Applications poured in from police academies, military bases, security firms, and even neighborhood watch groups. The Francis effect had become the Francis future. Somewhere in the crowd, a young guard helped an elderly woman with her groceries. Somewhere else, a security officer tutored a struggling student. Around the world, in countless quiet moments, Francis's final message lived on. Love is the only guard that never fails. The Pope, who had arrived at a humble guard quarters to say goodbye, had instead said hello to a revolution that would outlive them all. In trying to guard hope, they had discovered that hope, in the end, guards us all. Retriclaude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. 3.7 Sonnet